Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, February 24 work session of the Ann Arbor City Council, in which we discuss the fiscal year 21 budget, public services area, and the city's attorney's office. Before we get underway, I have two very brief items to chat through. As folks know, as council knows and the public know, we have a special session scheduled for 9 p.m. today. It has been, I believe, council's intent and desire that the Norris report be distributed to Chief Cox in advance of that session, so that he will have an opportunity to review it. Is there any objection to my doing so? It's my inference not. If not, I'll say, Mr. Postman, if you would please distribute that to Chief so that our special session can be efficacious. Thank you. Further, I'd just like one quick announcement offline, if I may, and that is,
if you could please maybe explain to the public and the audience, maybe that's not here, exactly why you just did what you did, if real quickly.
Mr. Postma, if you would.
And that is, this is a privileged document at this point, and so while it comes to me, you all hold the privilege, and therefore sending it to Chief Cox at this point is the appropriate thing, and I just wanted direction to do that. That's all. We will be making further decisions about the document shortly, so this is the first step.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, council member. As folks know, there'll be a leadership transition here, and which will necessitate an interim city administrator. I just want folks to know that at our next Council Administration Committee meeting, which is going to be held this upcoming Thursday, Councilmember Lum and I will bring a resolution to the Administration Committee for the purpose of advancing Mr. Crawford as the interim city attorney, interim city administrator, assuming that
Folks, he's welcome to do both jobs if you'd like him to.
Assuming that passes, and I have every reason to believe it will then be brought to City Council for full consideration on March 2nd. That's all. Thank you, Councilmember Lum, for that. Mr. Hupy, you have the con.
Thank you. Craig Hupy, Public Services Area Administrator. And with me tonight, I have Marty Prashon, our Chief of Staff for Public Services, Nick Hutchins, City Engineer, Molly Maciejewski, our Manager of Public Works, and Eileen Naples, our Resource Recovery Manager. So when you ask me a question that I appeared stumped at, I'll be turning toward them. Tonight we will be looking at the Public Services Area FY21 budget. We'll be looking at it through the lens of the council priorities from the December planning session with council. We'll present our measures of success and key performances. We'll talk about impact and non-financial adjustments for FY21, reminding folks that this is the second year of a two-year budget. So not everything that's in the budget is new. It was probably placed in there. You're going to see a number of items that's in the budget as additionals from this past year, but they're not new. They were already budgeted when we did the two-year budgeting. We'll talk about the utility rates. We'll do a enterprise fund overview, quickly walk through the sidewalk gap dashboard, and then we'll talk about some of the horizon issues. A reminder for everyone, Public Services is made up of the administration unit and 5 working units plus the capital projects. The capital projects unit is a bookkeeping unit where the FTEs that are expended in capital projects are accounted for. Back to the December work session, there were a number of items presented to council that council rated, if you will remember on your quadrant chart, high, or it was reported out on the quadrant chart. High was the upper right quadrant, low was the lower left, and then the moderate were the other 2 quadrants. Tonight we will be going over the 6 high items, 3 in engineering and 3 in public works. This chart just shows how the expenditures within public services are spread, and then reminding us of the 6 items we're going to cover in tonight's budget from engineering and public works. In engineering, the measures of success for the priority items, expedite street light repairs. We will be tracking and reporting monthly on street light outages. Our goal is to repair 100% of the city-owned street light outages within 72 business hours of the misdig clearance. The word business is missing on that slide, but that's key. Because if we have a report on a Friday, it's virtually impossible, or get a clearance on a Friday, virtually impossible to make the 72-hour. Advances Vision Zero initiatives. The major key for that is to finalize the Transportation Master Plan update. Once that is done, that will set the roadmap for advancing Vision Zero. Expedite sidewalk gap infill projects. We will complete the prioritization model that we have revised, and will annually report on existing sidewalk gaps and installations. In public works, the key items, key areas are maintaining the sanitary sewer system, expanding solid waste programs and services, and accelerating lead copper rule compliance. In the sanitary sewer, we will be implementing the sanitary sewer asset management plan recommendations. The measure we will be using is reducing the number of city-caused sewer backups. In the solid waste, receiving direction from council on the solid waste resources master plan, the shrimp as we lovingly call it, by June 30th, 2020, will allow us to plot the directions we need to go. We will be developing zero waste goals and measures. We are currently working on the MRF contract. It is likely that that will be delivered in late 20 or early 2021 of fiscal year when I say that. And be undertaking bids on residential recycling and non-residential collections. For the lead and copper rule, let me do a little explanation, starting with the lead and copper rule. We are not aware of any lead services within our system. Historically, we used a short piece of lead, 12 to 18 inches, to make the transition from water main to service line. It was bendable. When I say historically, it would have been nigh on almost 100 years ago when we were using galvanized services. We had been chasing those for decades. In the 90s and in the early 2000s, those have all been removed, and so there, to our knowledge, there's no lead in the system. However, when the lead rules came out, they have a twist to them, saying that if there is a downstream galvanized pipe that was ever downstream from a lead fixture, it is considered a lead service line, whether it's made out of lead or not. So now we are chasing the galvanized service lines, and the rules do not care whether it's on part of the city-owned system or part of the on-site private system of the property owner. We are chasing all the way up to the house. So that is a different set of circumstances. So our first goal is to do an inventory of finding all those galvanized service lines on private property, to figure out where they all are. That's our first goal. And then after that is done, setting up a program that keeps us in compliant with the rules, which says we have 20 years to remove all those galvanized lines. The financial impacts to achieve City Council's priorities, expediting streetlight repairs. It is we expect that to be a zero amount. We will be interfacing with DTE and motivating them to be responsive. Advanced Vision Zero initiatives. After the Transportation Master Plan is finished and reviewed, accepted by the city, that will set out the next steps for advancing that Vision Zero. So at this time, I can't tell you what the estimated cost will be. That will be determined as we go forward. Expediting the sidewalk gap infill projects. This is the resident-driven program that council funded for $150,000 in the current year, the 2020 budget. We do not have any money programmed in the 2021 budget because it wasn't envisioned when the 2021 budget was established better than a year ago. So for that to go forward, it would require an impact of $150,000 addition to the budget. Maintain the sanitary sewer system using the asset management plan. That was envisioned already, so there's no additional money. We had already put almost $600,000 into the budget to undertake those efforts. Expand the helps if I click the slide. Expand the solid waste program and options. It will be reporting on the new program implementation and newly developed performance measures. Again, we are not sure exactly what those will be involved, understanding that in the solid waste area, without a accepted solid waste master plan, we as staff aren't exactly sure what directions we're going. At the same time, we are negotiating a contract with Recycle Ann Arbor for opening up the MRF. Its financial impact is not fully understood yet. And we are going out for bids for residential recycling collection, and we'll be going out for bids right after that for commercial collection. And all of those will have financial impacts, and how that sorts out will have an impact on what programs we can offer. The accelerated lead and copper rule, that was envisioned when the budget was put together 2 years ago, so there's money for completing the inventory in the budget, and we are estimating our cost to replace galvanized services on the customer side at about $1 million a year for the foreseeable future. When I say foreseeable future, 15 to 20 years. Other impacts that are occurring in our budget that were not council priorities. The water treatment plant, our regulators have mandated a risk plan for the water plant. That is in the budget. We are, for public works, we have in the budget 1 FTE. Over time, we have centered on a CityWorks GIS software to manage our work orders. When work requests are made and work is done, we account for the labor, the materials, and equipment used through the CityWorks program, and then it assigns it to an asset, be it a section of road, be it a section of pipe, a valve, a hydrant. As that program has grown and become more robust, we now need an additional staff member to help support that. The purchase of a replacement asphalt mill. What the asphalt mill is the machine that grinds up at the road surface. It's a smaller mill than you would see contractors having. We use it for doing spot repairs on a small area or a portion of an intersection. This is not like when we'd go in and mill out a whole multiple blocks of a street to resurface it. It's more of a maintenance activity. And the increased asphalt material is, as we get the new mill and we use it more, we're expecting to use more asphalt. Purchase of additional brine equipment. This winter, we have been pre-treating streets with salt brine. We have been doing it relatively quietly because we weren't sure of the success or not of it. You may have noticed before a storm, you'll see a white milky set of streaks down the road. That's where we've gone and applied a liquid salt to the road ahead of a storm. We have found that to be relatively successful. It doesn't work in every storm, but we are expanding the salt brine program by buying additional equipment so we can treat more roads faster. Under engineering, we are asking for an FTE for right-of-way activity permits. Right-of-way activity has increased dramatically, and existing staff cannot meet the federally mandated and state mandated shot clocks that they have given us. We cannot proceed at our own time. If a utility company comes in and wants a right-of-way permit, we have a limited number of days we have to turn it around. So that is forcing us into requesting an additional FTE. Also, as part of this budget, we are asking for funds to design the sidewalk on the east side of Main Street from Stadium down to Ann Arbor Saline Road. That would be the sidewalk that would front most of Ann Arbor Golf and Outing and the U of M golf course. That's the design only, so we can get a handle on what is going to be the expense of building that sidewalk. And then adding one FTE to engineering for all the capital work that we have going on. Other impacts, there is a internal fee for carbon neutrality, sustainability of $100,000 that will be levied across the enterprise funds. And with all the activities we have going on, we keep sucking more resources out of the attorney's office, and it's only fair that we compensate the attorney's office for all the stress we put on that office. And let me go back. People ask, well, what are the issues going on that we have? And these are just the highlight. I'm sure Mr. Postema can add on to them. We have the wastewater treatment plant discharge phosphorus permit, which has been an ongoing battle with Eagle, and it's likely coming to a head this year. The whole right-of-way issues, as I alluded to, making our permit and our system compliant with all the federal regulations that have been handed down. And we are also have a legal request in to the attorney's office to look at sidewalk special assessment and alternatives. So there is a number of bigger items that we are putting on the attorney's plate. For the rate plan, the left column is the rates that were put into effect July 1, 2019. The right column is what we are proposing. Going back to 2019, when we talked about the rates, we had talked about trying to mirror the 19 rates in 20. When you look at our proposed rates in 20, we didn't quite do that. We have water going up 0.5%, but we have sewer coming down 0.5%, and stormwater at 11%. instead of 13. What's driving those rates is water quality and regulatory requirements. Debt service, mainly on the sanitary sewer side. We have to maintain our debt service coverage. Our rate has to be higher than our debt service. And infrastructure reinvestment on all the utilities. And on the stormwater, we're increasing our maintenance and investment in the stormwater system. At the bottom two boxes, you can see that the average quarterly bill will go up $16.07, if my math is correct, which is approximately $5.35, 34 cents, 36 cents each month. Going into the financial summaries of each of the funds, the water fund financial summaries, the point I want to draw your attention to is the lower right-hand corner number. The unrestricted fund balance at 27 million is going up substantially from previous year. That is us beginning to save for the water plant, the number one water plant replacement source water work that we will have to be doing in the future. That's probably in the $70 to $90 million price range for that plant, so we are starting to put money aside for that so we can finance as much of it with cash flow instead of debt. On the sanitary side, the sanitary sewer fund, the similar, nothing exciting really happening there, except again, we are seeing the fund balance go up. That fund balance is going up as a response to the fact that we have to have rates high enough to keep our debt coverage ratio in. So our plans for that increasing fund balance is to use it to cash flow more of our construction and less debt financing, and take advantage of the fact that the bond covenants as require us to have rates at a certain level that will build capital, and we'll just use that capital to plow back into the system instead of selling debt. Stormwater, again, similar situation. The numbers don't dramatically change from year to year, but you'll see the fund balance going up $3 million. That is in anticipation. We will have upcoming a couple of projects that we are looking at. One is the Churchill area stormwater mitigation in the Edgewood Stadium area, and having that balance will help us fund as much as we can out of cash flow instead of debt servicing for that. Major and local street fund, the news on that is the fund balance at the end of 2021 is I have not been advancing the slides, excuse me. The fund balance on that will be exactly on target at the end of the fiscal year, which is to have 1 year's balance in the fund, and it looks like Nick has worked his magic this year, and he is on target to hit the target. Street millage, there's a little more going on here that will take a little bit of explanation. Under the revenues, you'll see that transfers in are down considerably this year, or projected for coming in 2021, and county millage and other reimbursements is down, which results in, it looks like, a $8 million decrease in revenue. Transfers in is where other funds, i.e. water, stormwater, sewer, transfers money into the street fund to pay for their share of a project that may be occurring. Generally, we like to budget those projects within those funds, but we don't always get them done that way. Maybe the design is done in the straight fund and then we have to advance it. So it just shows that we're doing a better job, we're planning to do a better job next year of paying for those additional activities in the funds in which are being affected by the work. Under the county, with the county having a different budget year, a fiscal year than we have, their payments don't always line up, and last year we got more money because of their budget year than, we got more than a year's worth of money from them and their, because of the budget year differences. The bottom line, the unrestricted fund balance of 5.8 million is just a touch higher than the 5.7 million, which is our target, which is half of the annual millage income. Sidewalk gap assessment progress. This slide shows you that there's 144 miles of sidewalk gaps within the city. We have 435 miles of sidewalk. And since 2013, we've built 9.2 miles. For 2020, we are currently projecting to build 1.66 miles. And the bar chart underneath shows the annual addition of sidewalks. The Solid Waste Fund financial summary, as I said earlier in the presentation, it is difficult to make a projection forward in the Solid Waste Fund because we have so many moving parts going on between the negotiations for the MRF contract. We have 2 major bids going out and not having direction on the solid waste resource management plan. What you are seeing here is a budget that carries existing activities into the next year, but fully realizing that as each of those moving parts are clarified and we know what we are doing, we'll be coming back to council for adjustments and directions as we have more information. Horizon issues. Increased regulatory requirements and emerging contaminants. I am going to talk about those two together, and I'm going to use an example of biosolids at the wastewater treatment plant. A year ago, the wastewater treatment plant was not worried about PFAS, but PFAS is in our wastewater biosolids. We land apply our biosolids much of the year. That's our preferred method of beneficial reuse, using them as fertilizers. We expect that there will be increasing regulations on the biosolids, and we may not be able to land apply into the future. We'll have to be landfilling them. But even worse, if the PFAS is found to be a hazardous material, we will be having to be landfilling in a hazardous waste landfill. So we will go multiple times higher in our expenses for that. So that's just one example of where the regulatory environment and emerging contaminants collide and are likely to cause us substantial additional expenses in the future. Succession planning and recruitment. In the very healthy environment that we are in southeastern Michigan, it is increasingly difficult to recruit people into public services to work for a municipal or state salary in public services, and it's not as glitzy and glamorous, and we are attracting less people into the area. As much as those of us that work in the area like to think it's a cool job, maybe it's not universally accepted. The solid waste programs, we talked about that, is we don't have clarity yet on how and what we're going forward in solid waste, so that is an issue as we go forward. Contractor capacity In southeastern Michigan, if you were to look at at the amount of construction, both private construction and public construction projected beyond the books in the upcoming months, there is more work than there's contractors out there to do the work. That results in fewer contractors bidding on jobs, and them having what I would like to say dull pencils. They're not sharpening up and getting a very good price on them. So that is going to be an issue for us as the economy stays healthy. And then again, our continued need to invest in the infrastructure systems. We have to continually be putting money into all of our infrastructure systems. And so that is an issue going forward. With that, I'm sure you folks have a few questions.
Councilmember Griswold. Alum.
Thanks, great presentation. I have a couple of questions. First, the biosolids, are we testing them for PFAS right now?
Yes,
Oh, okay. And have we reported out the result?
we report them to the Eagle.
Oh, okay.
We have a testing plan that they have handed us that we do.
Oh, okay. And I had asked a question a few weeks ago for the budget process about how many of our crosswalks are without street lighting, and I don't know that answer has been developed
That
yet.
answer has not been given yet.
Okay.
I'm looking at Marty or Nick to know if they have the answer with them tonight.
So,
Not
oh,
tonight,
okay,
but
yeah.
we'll produce that.
Oh, okay,
We have logged that question in and are aware of it.
Great. Oh, okay. And I'm glad that we're focusing on the functionality of our streetlights. I think that we also need to try to get our crosswalks lit. And then my last question is, with Vision Zero, one of the principles is to do a crash site analysis and take corrective action as needed at areas where there's been a fatality or a serious injury. And so I see that you don't have dollar amounts assigned yet for Vision Zero. Are there any plans to address any of our sites, because it's obvious right now that we need an improvement?
I will start in on this, and Nick may jump up
okay.
and correct me. We do have a program for lighting our unlit crosswalks. We have that. Whenever there is a fatality, I look at Nick, and I'm sure our traffic engineers look at deficiencies in the roadway or the facilities for that. So that is ongoing.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks.
Councilmember Lum.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I would just say, Mr. Hubiet and your team, as I mentioned at the first budget session a couple weeks ago, we have a good, robust annual budgeting review process, and the work sessions are very much a key part of that. So I'd like to thank you and your staff for taking the time to provide all this detail and backup information. It's really helpful for us.
Thank you, and it's staff that does a lot of the grunt work.
Well, thank you all. It's greatly appreciated. And this work session with Public Services is obviously a key one, and is, for among many reasons, but it's the one where we discuss the capital and infrastructure projects for the year. And your attachment 2 that you provided us,
Yes.
The project work plan for this upcoming construction season. It's not something we've seen previously, and so I'd like you to
Thank you to Nick.
I'm sorry, Nick? Oh, well done. Thanks for providing that. You gives us a lot of good, specific info, so thank you. So my questions, both on some projects and operations, and I will also send in those that I don't touch on tonight. But again, thanks for providing us all this information before we dive in. Okay, on this 2020 street resurfacing program, for this year's resurfacing and capital improvement, capital preventative maintenance program, the 2020 work plan shows that the list of streets is more than can be done and needs to be pared down. So just a couple of questions on that. Is the constraint, I know you touched on this in the, is it horizon issue, that, contractor capacity and escalating costs. So, but I'm wondering is the constraint just more or less funding, or are there are there bigger issues, constraints in terms of contractor capacity?
I will start off by saying it's funding, much of it, but contractor capacity has been an issue on some of the projects where getting the contractor on site to do the work because they are so busy elsewhere is an issue.
Okay, so a bit of both. On the process of finalizing the list, is there still time for residents or council members to suggest streets that may or may not be on the initial list? And when will the final list be completed?
We expect to have the final list completed very shortly here as we're trying to get our plans out to bid for the summer's work. Feel free to send suggestions anytime.
Coming your way.
Our local street resurfacing program over the last few years has been focusing kind of neighborhood by neighborhood, moving around the city. And we've kind of the southwest side of town is our focus area for this year. As indicated, we've already got probably more streets in that area that we can handle right now. But if there are specific recommendations or complaints that you're hearing from
Okay,
residents, please send them my way. If we don't get them in this year, we'll try to figure out where we can work them in the
Okay.
coming years as well.
I like the surprise and delight at the end of the construction season last year, near the end of the construction season, when you did those repairs that were not planned initially on lots of the neighborhood streets. And, you know, I think people are grateful daily that travel on those streets because it's really, you know, and I think your goal is to extend the life of the streets. And
Correct, yeah.
So that's appreciated greatly. Sewer stormwater rate question. So a couple questions there, and data request on slide 12. The slide that speaks to water, sewer and stormwater rate increases. First question, does the planned 6.5% increase in water rates include any structure or customer class changes? And
Short answer on that is no.
no, okay. And is the 6.5% increase applied across the board to every customer class and tier?
The answer is yes. I had to look at Marty to make sure I was going to give the right
Okay.
answer.
Are there any structural changes to the sewer or stormwater rates?
No.
No? Okay. When council last discussed the water rates, my specific proposal to restructure the restructuring was defeated, but there was some consensus around reflecting the volume peaking for commercial customers, either through seasonal pricing or some other form of volume-based tiered pricing. These were alternatives offered by Arcadis, as you recall. I'm wondering if staff has evaluated those possibilities further, and if so, can you provide an update? If not, you know, why not? Do you need a specific resolution from us to do that?
No, at the time we looked at the commercial tiering, it was very difficult and cumbersome to be able to implement and do it correctly. The amount of effort from staff to go there seemed to be so high that it was not a viable alternative.
So we've not evaluated further.
Not further after
Okay.
we made that initial determination.
Okay. And then a data request, lastly. So in looking at the quarterly rates that you're proposing, the average residential customer will now be paying almost $1,000 a year. And obviously, the higher volume users will be paying a lot more than that. And I'm wondering if you can, if not tonight, but later, update us on the benchmark analysis that you've done in the past, comparing Ann Arbor residential water users, what
Yeah,
we
we're
pay
glad-
vis-à-vis
we'll-
other
we'll-
cities.
Yeah, we'll gladly do the updating of the benchmarking as we bring the rates back for your consideration.
Okay, at a couple of volume levels, you'll do the benchmarking. Do
answer
you
is
need a
yes.
formal request for this? No? Okay. I'll be following up. Right. And then just another one, last one on the water rates. The water fund reserves, vis-à-vis the rate increase. So again, thank you for providing the financial summaries for the major funds. That's helpful. On the water fund slide, which is slide 13, the unrestricted fund balance at the end of fiscal year 21 climbs to over 27 million. You mentioned, I recognize that the capital needs are high, and you mentioned that you're putting aside money for the water plant, treatment plant, and that the debt coverage ratio is a key factor, but the ratio is more than twice the minimum. So given that, I'm wondering if you thought, and the healthy fund balance, if you've thought of considered lightening up a bit on the rate increase that you're proposing for July.
It's a balance of what we increase in a level, in a uniform manner, so that when the plant project starts, there isn't a rate shock of a larger increase that we need to handle debt for the plant and capital for the plant. So as staff looks at it, they are trying to have uniform annual increases so that when the project is kicked off, you don't see a sudden 25% or larger type rate increase.
Okay, and I will just say that I think we're really burdening folks with these rates, and, every dollar counts for them, especially for folks on fixed incomes. Thank you.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Hupy, and staff. It's always exceptional work. And now, being 4 years into this, it's been incredible to see stuff work through the capital improvements plan now into annual budgets, which is really exciting. I had a question about slide 18. From 2014 to 2017, year over year, we installed more sidewalk than the year prior, and actually a pretty substantial increase in the number of feet that we installed between 2014 and 2017, almost 8,000 additional feet a year. And then in 2018, 2019, it drops back down to 2015 levels, and I'm just curious about what changed there.
I would guess, but I'd be taking a guess at this point. I'll look at Nick to see if he can substantiate my guess.
Well, I hadn't particularly contemplated that, so I'm not sure if I necessarily have a good answer right at the moment. We might have to look into that a little bit more and get back to you. But a lot of it is just around whatever's coming up in the CIP, in our capital improvement plan. In some cases, we usually have a certain number of kind of standalone sidewalk gap-filling projects that we want to do, usually using with some offsetting some of that with some federal aid money. The kind of supplemental stuff that comes up beyond that tends to be things that happen in association with other capital projects, like maybe we have a road construction project that has some sidewalk gaps on it, and we want to address that while we're doing the other project as well. The other thing is we do fill some sidewalk gaps through private development as well, which we don't control. So those numbers that are on that include all of those different things. And I wouldn't necessarily see it as, well, it is, I guess it is going up and going back down, but I think it's just, it's somewhat natural fluctuation through all of those kind of factors, I guess.
And the guess that I would have made would be some of that might be larger federal aid projects like the sidewalk bike path along the north side of Washtenaw, which was fairly long and added a lot of footage. And it was done because the money was longer ago than that? Okay, so.
But like Stadium Boulevard, for example.
So when the federal aid becomes available, we jump on it and use it.
Cool. No, that paints a picture. Thank you.
Councilmember Umlawi.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor, and thanks to the staff for putting this work together and taking a really big budget and a lot of work and condensing it in 30 minutes in a really easy way to understand. When we talk about the right-of-way permits and the small cells and mandates that are coming down, we've heard a lot of concerns in the community about the safety concerns, and I understand we're under state and federal laws Do we charge for these permits, and are we factoring that into the additional cost of administering these
No,
permits?
you're hitting a sore point. Not only have they told us we must issue the permits, we must issue them in a set time frame. We must issue them for a set fee, which is far less than it costs us to produce the permit and review them.
Nice. Thank you for answering that and being on top of it like usual. Also wanted to thank, the staff for, as Councilmember Lum said, having some additional money in the budget and hitting some projects like in the Fifth Ward. Liberty Street was done late in the construction season. So that was, just wanted to give thanks. It's good to see the Ann Arbor Saline Road path being proposed here in the work. Is the university helping in any way, form on this path?
As we go forward with the project, we'll be engaging the university, and yes, we expect them to be involved in it. But until we know exactly what the scope is, it's hard to make an ask at this point in time.
Okay, fair enough.
I will say generally, in the past 6 to 8 months, the university has been very forthcoming with asks and helping and working in a very favorable manner with the city.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. How much of a down payment, I mean, you're saying we're setting aside a lot of money, and perhaps this is for Tom Crawford, to pay for these major infrastructure improvements like Plant One. Get to a point of, when do we just start borrowing the money when money is cheap versus paying for it in cash? Like, do some deferred projects end up costing us more because of, further deterioration or something? So we're borrowing the money and doing the improvements would actually save us money if we weren't saving up for the cash. Do we, I hope, and just want to put it out there.
In general, I don't think we're deferring any major projects as we accumulate capital for the future plant replacement. Are there some projects that aren't happening as fast as we would like? Yes, but we are not deferring anything that we think would put us at risk. The other piece is a little harder to answer is because we don't know at the time we do a plant upgrade what the financial markets and what the state will have in the way of loan assistance as we go forward. Where there is state loan assistance, we obviously pursue those if it makes sense. I use the example of the wastewater treatment plant. At the time we were doing the last phase of the wastewater treatment plant, the state loan assistance was at a higher rate than the marketplace, but the state loan didn't require any payment to start until we were completed with the work. So it was like having a free construction loan. Should your bank give you a free construction loan to work on your house? That was a gift. And there was significant forgiveness when we had energy savings. So when that was all mixed together and considered about going in the open market or going with the state, we went with the state because that was a better value. So that's the type of assessment we do with each large project.
Okay, now going to the water rates, I won't spend as much time as my colleague down there did, but I'm just concerned about our dependency on a rate system that's dependent on volume. When we talk about carbon neutrality, when we talk about conserving our resources, our current rate system is based on volume and the need to sell water, need to sell a lot of water to keep it solvent. So I urge that as we look at our rates to factor in the fixed costs of delivering water and maintaining the system, as well as volume. I just concerned about a volume-dependent rate system.
Your point is heard. It was heard when we were doing the rates a year ago. Part of our issue is the way our state rules and regulations are in setting rates, that we have to be proportional to the service delivered. And also, if we go to a fixed charge, that tends to be regressive for the smaller users. It penalizes the low users, or gives, I shouldn't say penalizes, it gives them a larger bill than they would have if it was based on just volume. So it's a balancing act, but your point is heard.
I appreciate you still remember. Got it. Cool. Thank you, and thanks for all the work.
I just, first off, thank you to you and the entire group, those here and those whom you represent for the work that you've done to get us to this point and the work that you guys really do every day. I guess I'd like a little bit more color at some point, and maybe it's tonight, about the fluctuation in the expenditure. Just taking a look at, and I don't have the slide number in front of me, but,
Which fund?
this is in streets.
Okay.
Understanding that there's, some money comes in when it comes in, some money doesn't, is attributed to other funds. I think we threaten to have some metrics that appear to be apples to apples, but in fact, it's an apple and a painted wood sculpture of an apple. And I think we run the risk of having it appear that we're walking away from the roads because the revenue and because the expenditures on the roads are going to be sharply less this year than in years previous. What I guess I'd like, in addition to the explanation, is to staff consider if there are other metrics that they can include as they go forward and describe what it is that we're doing. Miles treated, by way of example.
Point taken.
Is something I think that would be very useful to have for years previous, years present, and years anticipated.
Point taken, and we'll gladly deliver.
Thank you. Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you. I agree with you about that metric. It's important to have different ways to look at the same outcomes here. So I guess I will thank you, Mr. Hupy and staff. My only nod to the water rates is that, do we recall what year we started doing this kind of 6% steady increase? Was it 2015? That's what I have in my
I think
notes.
it's on the slide.
I don't, not the restructuring. That was like, but the actual, we started putting on the 6.5%, 7%, with recurring year after year. I just wondered what year you remember.
We can deliver that to you. I
Yeah.
don't know it off the top of my head.
It occurs to me that if you have a water rate in the year 0, and then you go up between 6 and 7% every year, and by the time you get to year 10 and a half-ish, between 10 and 12, we've doubled your rate, right? And so your rate's gonna be doubled. And so if we started in 2015, we had 10 years, 2025, our water rates will have been doubled in that 10 and a half years approximately. And, it's another way of looking at it. Like, that's pretty extreme. Our needs and our commitments to the water treatment plant and wastewater treatment and stormwater and all that have basically, because we're doing cost of service, we're saying that those needs and those demands have doubled in that amount of time. That's possible, that the needs have doubled in 10 years or will have had doubled?
The needs have stayed, the needs are the needs as we identify them. The issue with utility costs is the cost, I'm going to say the consumer price index, but it's not the consumer price index. The cost for utilities goes up faster than they do for the consumer's price index. When we look across the utility industry, if the consumer's price index, for sake of argument, is 3, though in the water industry, the cost will be higher, like 5 or 6. So you can't compare utility costs to the general consumer price index. So that's one of the problems. And we are facing an older system that needs a high level of investment into it. We still have pipes in the ground that are 100 years old, and we've got to chase those. We've got a water plant that was built in the 30s, so it's coming up on 90 years old, and we have to replace it.
And so
So those needs don't go away.
Sure, and some of these needs that are protected in that doubling also are like the unfunded mandates, right? Like the lead and copper rules from the state.
The lead and copper rule at $1 million a year, yes.
So, all right, well, thank you for putting that in perspective. So when we started this inventory, we're talking about inventory for the lead and copper rules, and we're also talking about a new meter program. And is it possible that those items be combined? Because we have 20 years on the lead and copper, and I know when we're putting the meter in is when
Well, we are combining the
that already
meter,
is.
we are combining the meter program with the inventory. The folks that are
Okay.
going in to the homes to do the meter changes are actually doing the hands-on, eyes-on inventory for us.
So they're seeing that galvanized stub coming up, and, okay, I just wanted to make sure. How's brine working out? Has the cost of implementing the brine program, is there some point at when it's gonna offset the benefit is gonna offset other costs in the system of maintaining our roads?
I don't expect there would be a cost that way. What it is by applying brine on the roadways, we end up with less snow and ice bonding to the road pavement. So during the early stages of an event, the road is, for lack of a better word, easier to traverse, safer to traverse.
So it's more of a customer service issue than a,
Yes, it's not intended to change the life of the road.
oh, okay. So you have some FTEs asked for, and I see there's two of them, and one, Councilman Ali Ramwali down there has pointed out that it's pretty outrageous that these right-of-way permits are set, the rate is set, and that's from the federal government. That small cell, that's like the 5G and so on,
Yes.
and we have no way to implement a fee for service on that. It's just mandated from the
They have set the,
FCC.
they have already set the fee regardless of what it costs us to review and issue the permit.
Okay, so when the third FTE was increased capital engineering, what type of programs is that for?
Generally, all of them, be it water, sewer, roads, any of the large capital projects that you see across any of these funds,
We're just doing more?
we're doing more.
Okay. It's just a comment on a side. I know we've been having trouble with the wastewater treatment and the phosphorus discharge permits. I know we've been in court with Eagle and all that. So I have some friends who are in other wastewater systems that are on the Huron River, wastewater treatment facilities. And I think that we've talked about a little of this behind the scenes, that the word on the street is that if the Belleville Yacht Club and those folks down there didn't impound their lake improperly, that they wouldn't have this phosphorus trouble, and the river would flow better. Is there any truth to that? That's just what I'm hearing.
Well, Belleville Lake is an impoundment on the river. I wouldn't say it's impounded improperly or not. What our argument with Eagle on our phosphorus is, our science says if we could turn our phosphorus off to zero, discharge no more phosphorus going forward, they would still have their phosphorus blue-green algae issues in those lakes, because it is, the problem is resides in the lake muds and not in the phosphorus we are discharging. That is, in a nutshell, our legal case with Eagle.
Okay, thank you for that. At some point, we're gonna talk about these internal carbon fees, but this might not be the time. I think we'll discuss those generally, right, in the next work session? Okay, thank you.
Well, they'll be discussed when Dr. Stoltz comes back. I don't know if that's exactly the next one or not, but it's in March.
Councilmember Smith.
Mr. Hubie, you talked about the difficulty of recruiting and attracting talent. Can you remind us of significant retirements that are coming up?
I don't think it's appropriate to discuss retirements in a public setting.
3 or 4, 5, 10, is it, I think we're trying to get a handle on, how much overhire is necessary.
I haven't done it exactly by numbers, but in each of my units, there are significant folks that are working past their
So
their
this will
dates.
be in your mind, this is a horizon issue, will be a
Continue,
considerable.
it will be continuing.
Yeah.
Understanding that folks that came on board in the late 80s, early 90s are now at the point where they can retire. Generally, they're staying on because of family commitments, kids in school, or other activities, but we have a number of folks that could retire.
Okay. I think that would be helpful for us to understand the, not only the short-term impact, but kind of the horizon issue of the 5 years of overhire that might be necessary for some of these positions and what that might mean.
As you go out that far, it gets a little fuzzy as to know
Sure.
what folks are doing. Every year when we budget, we try to look at who's eligible to retire and try to take a swag at whether they will retire or not, so we put money into the budget to cover those.
Okay.
But it's not an exact science.
Sure. No, I understand. I just wanted to get a sense of, the
Yeah,
volume of
it's-
potentials.
It's not only Ann Arbor, it is throughout the whole utility and public service, public works area. That recruitment for the folks that are leaving, the brain drain, the experience that goes out the door is a real problem that all those sectors across the nation are facing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Humphrey. This has been very helpful, and I appreciate the work that you and your staff have put into this. We've found trace amounts of PFAS in our biosolids and in our compost materials. Is that having an impact on the commercial, our ability to commercialize those products?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it won't be in the future.
Is it
That's
because,
why it's a horizon issue.
yeah. Is that because the numbers are still so low?
The numbers in the compost are such that they are extremely low, and there's nothing to compare them to science-wise. Similar in biosolids. When the biosolids are applied to soil, there isn't good science understanding yet of what happens.
Thank you. The lead pipe rule, the lead copper
Yeah,
rule,
yes,
it's a state mandate, isn't it?
yes.
So this is a question for our city attorney. Are we looking at an unfunded mandate that we can ask the state to fund?
The issue from the state, there are unfunded mandates and there are unfunded mandates that are actionable. I think that's what you're getting at, whether
Yes.
we can go at this. There are all sorts of mandates that cause additional work. There is no doubt about that, and all departments are aware of that. The more technical question I'd have to look at specifically, I know there's been people looking at it in the city attorney's group and other things, but as to the specific, I can't answer you that other than we always look at everything that the state does and everything that the federal government does as we look at small cell. There is more difficulties on the horizon that we will need to address. But right now, it is causing work and important work.
Partial answer to your question. A group of municipalities, Detroit and other municipalities in southeastern Michigan, did file a lawsuit against the state for the unfunded mandate. It was turned down. They lost it. It went out on appeals, and I'm looking at Molly to know if the appeal is in or not, or did they lose the appeal too? Okay, they elected not to appeal it.
Okay, thanks so much.
Further questions? Councilmember Bannister.
I had a question on slide 7 about the city-caused backups. And then the goal was to reduce those backups. Do you know roughly how many city-caused backups we have and what the goal might be, and if there'll be a dashboard or data?
Yeah, I will tell you, I don't know the number, but I'm going to look at Molly, who can tell me the goal number. 15 per year.
It's sanitary or storm?
Sanitary. Understand, stormwater systems are intended to back up.
Well, I remember we had those couple incidents with construction, concrete debris
Yes.
getting in and causing the backup, so, okay. On slide 8, about the snow removal, do we have any money or plans to help clear the ice and snow away from bus stops?
Bus stops, under our ordinance, are the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. And if there's any assistance, that would have to come from AATA that manages and maintains the bus stops.
Okay, and it was, yes, and it was just, we did receive a lot of feedback from residents this last few snows, because they would clear it, and then the city plow would re-add a huge immovable pile of ice.
Yes.
In some cases. So just anything the city can do on those. And I think that I'll include the rest of my questions in the written agenda questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lum.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just two other quick ones. Back to the Major and Local Street Fund, slide 16. The projected fiscal year 20 numbers look like we're going to spend the available street repair resources for the year, including the excess fund balance. And I'm looking at Mr. Hutchinson. Is that correct?
Can you repeat the question again,
It looks like we're
please?
spending the available street repair resources for the year, plus the, including the excess fund balance.
Yes,
So that's correct?
You can see that we're
Yeah.
spending 3.4 more than we're taking in.
Thanks. So when you present the plan for fiscal year '21, do you expect the same, using all the available resources?
Yeah, in '20, we're planning to expend 8.1 more than we're taking in, and in '21, we're planning to spend 3.4 million more than we're taking in, drawing the fund balance down to the recommended minimum.
Okay. And then can you remind us if the state's extra road funding allocation is continuing, or has that stopped?
We're in our final year of it.
We're in the final year? Okay. And then just one other, thank you. Got a lot, so I'm trying to pick. Just in general on debt capacity, I think I saw Mr. Crawford over in the corner. I mean, we don't talk a whole lot about debt capacity and debt levels, and because the city's debt levels are relatively low, so we tend not to talk about it. But when you think of the potential major investments that are on the table for our consideration, $50 million for a new solar panel at the landfill, TBD millions for affordable housing, $80 million for a new train station, $50 million for the tree line, and the list, can and could go on. So my point here is that these are huge investments that are over and above our basic fundamental responsibility to maintain the infrastructure, the roads and the water and sewer system that we'll be borrowing for as well. So debt capacity and debt service costs are something, I think, as a council, that we do need to discuss and keep on the radar screen. So I'm hoping that, not tonight, but that Mr. Crawford will be able to speak, and tonight if he wants to, speak a bit to that, to our debt capacity, what ongoing debt levels he feels comfortable with as our CFO, and if he doesn't feel comfortable throwing out specific numbers tonight, a follow-up on those questions would be just fine. So a follow-up would be good. Just,
But understanding, the short answer I was going to give is understanding that we are a enterprise fund-driven my operation is mostly enterprise fund.
Right.
So each of the enterprise funds have differing debt loads and ability to carry
Right,
debt. It's
right.
not, the solar array doesn't affect the water system necessarily versus affordable housing. So our ability to take on debt in the utility systems
You can just charge more.
is
rates.
governed by our ability to generate rates to cover the debt.
Right.
And so you're asking a question as if the city was one big fund put together, and we're not. We're a multitude of different funds. I don't remember off the top of my head if we're 10, 12. And so each of those funds have individual debt limits and abilities.
I recognize that, but just in general, again, for a follow-up later for Mr. Crawford, just all, and I appreciate your response, and I know you can just raise rates to cover, borrow more money, and the
Well,
rates.
the intent is not to raise the rates unnecessarily.
Right. But just in terms of the debt levels in general for the city as a whole, and our debt capacity as a whole, I understand it's just something I think we should start having a conversation about. So I would appreciate the follow-up on, numbers and appropriate debt levels and that sort of thing. And then recognizing the different funds, your 3 requested FTEs, just to do a little segue there, could you tell us what funds those are coming out of? The GIS city work support, the right-of-way activities, small cell work, and the capital project engineering?
I will start off with the GIS and city works. That is spread across a number of funds. It's all the funds that operate out of the Wheeler Center, and there are 5 major funds, 6? I'm looking at Molly and,
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
what? At least 6 funds that position is spread across, supporting all those activities. The
Right-of-way?
The right-of-way is coming out of 3 funds,
How many, what?
3 different
3?
funds.
Capital project engineering?
Capital project engineering is spread across the capital project, so whatever the funding is for all the various capital projects, their time is charged directly to the project. If they're working on a water project, it's charged to water. If they're working on a road project, it's charged to the road funds. So that is directly on the projects they're working on.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or discussion? Thank you so much. Was there one more? I'm sorry.
Well, I did have, just for fun, I was just wondering, was there anything to share, a sneak preview of the internal carbon neutrality fee and how that's going to work?
That is not a question for me to be able to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sort of daunting to come up and look at a time clock that says 3 minutes. So I feel like I understand all of you that come to speak for 3 minutes. The good thing is it doesn't seem to be moving, so I have much more than 3 minutes. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. It's a pleasure to talk about the office that I've been involved in for coming on 17 years and the changes that have occurred over that time. Happy to talk about really meeting the needs both of the council, the city administrator, and all the departments. And what's daunting whenever I look at Craig's slide is the amount of work that at least one person in my office, and probably more than one person, is going to have to do. And I'll go through each of these boxes of assignments, but the same general principle is involved in each of them. The work goes down from Mr. Huppy
and he very effectively manages his department, and it goes down, and there are many, many people who are working on all sorts of projects, so that funnels out. And then at some point, it all funnels back. And it funnels back through the legal, and at that point, there's not the 30 people, 40, however many people that are working on the projects. There's usually one person in my office assigned with managing those tasks. And I think that Craig and I have talked about it. We talk about it regularly, prioritization. But there are big issues. And over time, the present structure that I have is not sustainable. And I'll just say that because each of the service area administrators want more every year. That is clear, and I don't blame them. Don't blame Craig. Don't blame Derek Delacourt. Don't blame any of them. It's the volume of things that come on. And Councilmember Eaton properly identified there are unfunded mandates all over the place. And the fact that you can sue for them and go to court and have the court say it's not a legally unfunded mandate, that's sobering. But in any case, I'm not here to complain about it. It's a pleasure to do all this work. It's been a pleasure to attract people into public service who are so dedicated that they're willing to deal with a constant onslaught of new things, and that's exciting for a lot of people. So any horizon issue that any of the service area administrators have raised has an impact directly on my office. And so, you know, Mr. Wilhelm, who's taken over for Matt Rechtine and ultimately Abby Elias, who was here before. Craig will tell me that the legal work worked best in 2018 when I had two, as part of the succession plan, I had two attorneys working on his things full-time. And the intent was to overlap, and gradually that changed, and there was some overlap. But over time, they were working side by side, and he was the happiest there was, and that time is now gone. In community services, likewise, you all know Kevin McDonald and the increase in development in that area. That has been really striking over the past 2 years. It reached the point where we finally hired outside counsel for the first time in a long time to do an entire case outside. That's the Trinitas case. Very expensive to hire outside, $125,000. One case. In any case, that is the difference between what we pay inside and what we pay outside. So that's a constant balance, and we need to anticipate that because the city does get sued. It's cutting edge. The activities of this council are cutting edge. This is a very active community, and I make no complaint about that. Finance, there are significant areas that Mr. Crawford will talk about it. They relate to IT. They relate to smart cities. They relate to technology. Those are all horizon issues, and they're complicated, and there are legal issues that are upcoming in that area. Also related to an increase in area, and it relates to working efficiently. As you know, I have a prosecutor who prosecutes about 2,000 cases. The most efficient way for us to prosecute these cases is everybody's guilty, and they just pay a fine, and we go on. That's a very efficient model to process problems in the city. However, you all know that that is not the right model for the city. It's not the model that you want for prosecutorial services in the district court. And the model is not to work them as fast as possible, but to actually slow down a bit and work intensively. Ariane Slay has taken over really a 2-year project of looking entirely at legal advice given to the police. That has increased. It's something that you all want. It's important to you that the police get correct legal advice. She spent an incredible amount of time doing that, and she's a great teacher. In the prosecution area, it takes about
over 1,000 hours to manage a docket of about 2,000 cases. One of the parts of that is slowing it down and getting people involved in the district court into diversion programs. And I'm telling you, that takes some time. Some of that is handled by an assistant who does an excellent job of managing that. But it is very high volume, and to slow down and get people into programs that are helpful for them takes time, but it is the right thing to do, and it is what you want, unless you tell me differently. We have another person Chris Frost, who you know, works on boards and commissions. That's an area, city of Ann Arbor, you have to love it. Probably has more boards and commissions than any other city in the state. I don't know that for a fact, but it's very important to you all, and I understand that. They have a lot of questions, and Mr. Frost is involved with boards and commissions, but also is involved in a hybrid between public services and community services, and that is the increase in all of the right-of-way. That's sort of a hybrid issue that keeps coming up, easements, licenses, property, and so on. We have an attorney who works on litigation with me. That's one of the things that I do. And he does litigation support, not just support, but actually research and writing, and also FOIA advice. Well, FOIA has expanded greatly, as you all know. This is an area that we continue to look at, and spent a lot of time advising on that last year. I think I've covered about everything. Kristen Larkham, who you know, also does work on zoning, building and zoning ordinance violations. Guess what? Derek Delacourt and his group really ramped up the enforcement areas, partly because you all want it. That's an area where in the neighborhoods, you get complaints, they're sent down, and she aggressively works on that. So I'm just going through. I've named everybody and what their areas are. But for each of the areas, again, think of the funnel. It goes out and it comes back. In addition to that, we have the council. You all want a lot of information, and you should have that information. That's another area that we've spent more time on this year. And the issues that each of you are concerned with, if you're concerned about it, we're concerned about it. So that takes time. But it's a zero-sum game in some ways. We have to constantly reprioritize and decide where the effort should be focused. So that's the overview. When I came on in 2003, I looked at it. The council said, I looked at the staffing. I said, the problem you have is you have not staffed this office properly. And we worked on it. We had 14 FTEs at that time. Over time, that has been decreased. And at the same time, since certainly over the last three or 4 years, each department has had additional areas. So I'm always looking at efficiencies. I'm looking at not using outside counsel when we can. I recruit people who I have volunteers in the summer to provide. I'll think of every creative way to add bodies that don't cost money, but in the end, this is where we are. So let me, specific demands, despite this, I'm not one to move quickly. It's something that I've talked with Craig for some time about additional help for public services. He's been prepared and has been to fund, it's listed as $74,000, but he's prepared to contribute $60,000 from his budget. And you might ask, where am I going to get a half-time FTE? We'll see what's out there. I believe that there may be a market for somebody who likes to work half-time. What half-time is in our office is quite an interesting question, and so I will have to figure that out. But I do think that there are the challenges that I'm facing in hiring is that it's boom time in the legal profession. Any qualified attorney has many, many opportunities. And so coming into public service, again, Craig hit it right on the head, and there was an article about it. People don't want to come into public service. That's a shame for me because I've dedicated my life to this since I came in 2003, and I'm happy to do it for the city. But I haven't figured out quite why, but despite that, I'm quite good at getting people to come in to public service and come to the city, and I'm happy about that. So it's a challenge, but that's the main cost up there, and I also have a small cost for converting a legal assistant to a quarter of FTE. So those are the things I'm asking for, and these are, again, horizon issues. They've been cribbed a little bit from the other service areas administrators, but everything that they're looking at and the directions that they're going, we're going right with them because we are here to serve them, and I think if you ask them, they will talk about the people assigned to them. We're very dedicated to do it, but the legal work and the things that are changing in society, it's just exponential. So with that, I'm not going to, I'm over the 3 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember online.
Thank you, Mr. Postma, for putting this together, making it short and sweet. I just have a couple of points. When you began talking, you talked about this isn't sustainable. And so what does sustainability look like, before you ride into the sunset? How will you reorganize this office in a way that it is sustainable? What do we need to do to make that happen?
Well, I'm not riding into any sunset.
I ain't saying tomorrow, I'm just saying,
But
forever.
But at some time,
Appreciate everything you've done for us.
at some time, as you know, I promised to stay at least through July of this year, and have promised actually to finish the succession planning that I have planned, and that should be done at the end of this year. That's very important to me. I think that the sustainability is to understand what the changes in technology, what the changes in environmental in particular, what the changes in sustainability issues will come up, and why there's a legal need and where that's going. So I can't fully answer your question.
I'm just looking for maybe just a framework which you helped develop and institute and create that the city operates now, how you reorganized the organization when you came in.
Right.
And are you looking to do a significant reorganization to address what we just talked about?
I'm not, because the issues that we've developed, we've developed templates, policies, practices that move very smoothly, actually, for routine work. That is done very efficiently. It's the new work and the cutting edge work. So the sustainability is again to see what the issues are and how much legal need they have for them. But I just think that at some point things may become so specialized, and I believe that to be true in the environmental area, that those things will probably have to go to outside counsel.
Right.
And that will have to be built in to the whole sustaability and energy issues that you're.
I would just maybe use adaptability, perhaps. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to correct you on
Sure.
your words. You have much stronger ways of making a better case, but adaptability would perhaps seem more fit for what you just described. And just as a
Yeah,
footnote,
adaptability is, we're very adaptable. The processes that we have are, we have computer systems, we have other things that work very well. But looking at what priorities are, we may have to talk to the service areas about what they're doing. So I hear you on that, and I'll give it more thought as we go through the budget cycle.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
I
Appreciate
know
your
my
support.
colleagues got questions I don't
Sure.
want to.
Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Postma. What other departments have dedicated legal support that they pay for like this one in public services?
I think public services is the only one because they can pay things, Craig might be able to tell you, they can pay things out of certain funds. And again, I haven't looked at it that closely. Abby Elias, when she was here, knew all of those, but it's something that goes way back that they have the ability to pay from dedicated funds. And so I don't know if you could answer that.
Our funding for legal services is actually twofold. The municipal service charge looks at all the work that we had sent to council, to the attorney's office, and then that is figured in the municipal service charge. But that's not necessarily updated every year, every 2 years, so that when we have larger projects, larger cases coming up, we fund those outside of the municipal service charge with direct charges to the funds that are causing the work.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then just a question about the request to the budget for outside legal services, support by $25,000 in fiscal year '21. How much is in the budget for that in fiscal year '20, and what are we projecting for the year?
I believe it's $100,000, and I can
It's
follow
100.
up on what my
Okay,
projection
thanks.
is on that.
So if you could, follow up on how much is in the budget for fiscal year '20 and what we're projecting for you, that'd be great. Thanks.
Happy to do that.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question. I think it might be along the lines of what Councilmember Romlawi was asking. The distinction between the times we need to hire outside counsel because of specialized expertise that we need versus hiring outside counsel because we simply don't have the man hours. I'm curious, you mentioned Trinitas as an example of when we hired outside counsel. Which situation do you think that would fall into?
I believe that Derek Delacourt, if he were here, would indicate that Kevin McDonald's work last year increased dramatically on things, even with outside counsel. He spent a lot of time on Trinitas, but that was one where we were actually in a crunch and did not. I think they spent 400 hours in a 5-month period, and we did not have the capacity to bring that in. It's been rare because we've been able to do it. If you look at the footing drain disconnect case over a 5-year period, that was probably 3,000 hours. It would have cost several $1 million to do. It was a type of thing that could be spread out over time, and we can incorporate it, and it's valuable for the city because the differential between what you pay as a salary to an attorney and what you pay for outside counsel is sort of jaw-dropping, and you each recognize that when you look at a total cost for $125,000. I can put somebody to work for a good part of the year for that, and so I don't take that decision lightly, and it's not in the city's interest to use outside counsel if in fact we could do it inside. And I've been proud that we haven't had to send things out. But that, directly to your question, it was the time crunch, and we did not have the capability to do it in-house during that time period.
Do you have, if just thinking of the situations when it's literally the time capacity rather than specialized expertise needed, do you have an idea that you actually need more staff?
I don't take this decision lightly. I listen to the service area administrators and what they need. There's no doubt that in talking to Mr. Hupy, again, he was happiest in 2018 when he had probably one of the most experienced attorneys in the state working on his, and a very talented young attorney working side by side. That's when he was happiest, I believe. I'm not saying he's unhappy, but he recognizes that, again, Tim Wilhelm will be advising. They go 25 deep in that department. on that. And if you think about that, Craig does a good job of prioritizing, but even within them, they all want they're very professional. They all want their work done as fast as possible, and they all want it at the same time. He has to sort of mediate over what's being done. But over the course of the year, a large volume is done, but there's constant reprioritization, and he can speak to that if you want.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Eaton.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. You may have touched on this, and I may have just missed it, but in Mr. Hoopie's budget, it shows $60,000 for the assistance to your department, but in your budget, it shows $74,000.
Yes, because that's all he'll give me.
Okay.
As we had the discussions, I said we could free up 60 immediately. Going forward, we look at 75 for the following year, but also understanding that when the municipal service charges are refigured, some of that money will be rolled back into the MSC. And so we'll have to go through resetting that.
And again, I'm not, I will look at a half-time FTE position. It may be that I won't immediately hire an immediate FTE, but I'll use a contract attorney that is willing to come under contract, not an outside counsel, but to try it out for a period of time and see how it works. I've been very hesitant over the time to add an FTE, partly because I know you all don't like FTEs added. And I don't say that flippantly because that's constantly a concern for the organization, and I respect that. But I have to deal with Craig this year on how we're going to do this, and I'm going to have to repeat what I did last year, frankly, with 3,000 less hours from people who, Abby will be gone, and then I had an extern that came in and was funded by, interestingly enough, the University of Chicago, who did a public interest fellowship, so I got free work for a year, and it was good work at an initial attorney level. But those 3,000 hours, I'm going to have to next year figure out where it goes with the same amount of people. And if I don't have this person, that it is problematic.
So I understand that you bring in attorneys of different experience and capacity, and so there isn't one number, but what's the general range of the cost of one FTE wages and benefits? How much does it cost to bring on one full-time attorney?
It depends at what level.
Okay.
I have levels all the way from younger attorneys all the way to more senior attorneys. And so I'd hesitate to get the range, but I can follow up on that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at other models with that, and whether I use temporary contract. You know, I'm open to all sorts of things, but I know I have the volume.
But you don't have a ballpark number what an FTE costs us?
Sure, I could take, you know, if the I think the additional amount is probably 25% on benefits if they're full-time. And so roughly, if it's a $90,000 newer attorney, that would probably be $120,000.
Thank you.
Again, $120,000 is what we paid on Trinitas for one case for 5 months.
Thank you.
Councilor Hayner.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question. I know that when you, like you yourself, you work on different cases, and so you bill or you assign your work hours to those different departments or cases or whatever. And I know at some point we ask over a period of time what the total hours or total dollar cost was to us for the Gelman matter. And so, is there any hope at any time in the future that we can make any effort to recover those costs from the polluter? Or are we just on our own trying to prosecute this case and carry this through?
Again, we're working on the Gelman case. I have to give you an analysis, if I'm not prepared to respond right now for it. I know, Councilmember Hayner, I actually know that is passion of everybody here on that. It's on the it's one of the foremost concerns on your mind, and so I will get you all information on that.
Yeah, you can see where I'm going with that.
Yep.
We spend a lot of money doing that. We spend a lot of money to defend ourselves, and you know, water treatment spends a lot of money on the PFAS and all this, and there are people out there who have caused these issues for us, and I'd love to see us try and claw some of that back in the future. Thank you.
If you want to claw anything back, let me just tell you, that takes work. If you're going to claw, you better work.
Further questions? Councilmember Bannister.
Yeah, I just had one question. That first slide where you have the blue boxes with all the different categories of
Yes.
expenses, would it be?
Well, it's not, it's expenses, but it's also services that each of those boxes do.
Yes. Do we have the hours to convert that into like a pie chart about how much percentage of the attorney's office time is spent on each of those boxes?
You know, that's an excellent question, and I can make it more granular. But for each of those boxes, that's a person. That's a person. So those are general tasks of that person. But I can give you more data that will be helpful for what how this sorts out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Further questions?
I got one last.
Councilmember Amlani.
I appreciate it. You said when you started there were 14 FTEs. Are we down to 9 or how many?
No, we're down to, I believe, 12 and a half FTEs.
12 and a half.
Yeah, we got cut like everybody else, despite my objection during the difficult times of 2008, 2009, 2010, and I was not immune from that. What's interesting about it is to compare the legal needs now in 2020, I was about to say 2018, that's where I like 2018 because Craig was so happy then, but to compare 2003 and 2020, there's just no comparison to the volume of work being done.
Further discussion? Thank you very much.
Happy to be here.
We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we would be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who would like to speak at public comment?
With respect, dear City Council, with respect, Mayor, I don't need to say dear Mayor and City Council, as you, Mayor, are part of City Council. When Lazarus was fired, it was stated that only 6 votes were needed since the Mayor did not appoint him, because it was the City Council that appointed him. I think there may have been a misreading of the charter, and I might be wrong, and I believe that a yes vote by the Mayor and 6 votes from council members were needed to fire Lazarus. According to Section 4.1 of the City Charter, it states the council shall be composed of the Mayor and 10 council members. To me, that means that when people say that Lazarus was appointed by City Council, well, that City Council also includes the Mayor. And so Lazarus, you were also appointed by the Mayor. This means, if I'm reading this charter correctly, that when Lazarus was fired, because he was appointed by the Mayor, who was part of City Council, then he should have been fired only if he got a yes vote by the Mayor and at least 6 votes by council members. When he was fired, Lazarus got 6 votes from council members, but not the yes vote from the Mayor. Let me repeat. If the Mayor is part of City Council and the City Council appointed the administrator, then it should have been a 6 council member and 1 mayoral yes vote requirement, and not just a 6 vote council member requirement. I have heard from Councilmember Lum that the administrator was hired by council and not appointed by council. To that, I would argue that if one is hired and not appointed, then take another look at Section 1212B of the Charter, as that applies to appointments. It specifically states appointed twice in that section. One might ask, one might ask, when would a 6 vote without a yes vote by the Mayor have worked? In this particular case, if Mayor Taylor lost the mayoral election and Councilmember Eaton became mayor, then only 6 votes would have been required. Why? Only 6 votes would have been required because former Mayor Taylor, who appointed Lazarus via his mayoral vote, would not have been at council anymore to place his mayoral vote. And so in that hypothetical scenario, Mayor Eaton could have removed Lazarus with only 6 votes. Sadly, looking forward into mayoral and council member elections, we should now ask each candidate, will you fire the city administrator? As I can't remember any of you having this as your part of your election platform. I also believe that this 6+1 vote requirement should be simplified to an 8 vote requirement on critical topics such as this. Good grief, you have an 8 vote requirements on items that are far less serious than firing a city administrator. Please note, I'm just Kai, I'm not a lawyer. I don't even know if this is true what I'm saying. Your lawyers will know more than I do. And Councilmember Eaton has stated to me quite clearly that he's sorry that I'm having difficulties understanding the charter. But I sincerely thank all of you for listening to my concern nonetheless on this matter. Keep in mind, some of you have spent months working in secret on this topic. Allow me to speak about it openly for a few days. And I worry that the charter wasn't followed correctly when Lazarus was fired, and I ask that in your closed sessions you revisit this topic in this portion of the charter. Just Kai.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Okay, well, it appears that after 30-some years, we still don't know how much money the city of Ann Arbor has paid for legal fees to address the Gelman contamination of our water. That's pretty sad. It's probably in the millions. And as someone who's been paying taxes in this town for a very long time, I'm very bewildered. We have a situation where this city council and multiple ones before it have shown such leniency towards polluters of our waters that at this stage where dioxin has covered every nook and cranny of our environment, we are still being told we don't know how much money we've spent on Gelman legal procedures. And at the same time, we are having this new problem with PFAS and 7,000 more compounds in its category being released into our waters as we speak by another manufacturer, another company, Tribar in Wixom. And what I'm wondering is, why is it that we have been so lenient towards Gelman all these years because they've gotten away with murder? And now we are showing the same leniency towards polluters of PFAS of our waters. Tribar still continues to work and release thousands of parts per trillion. As far as I know, up to 4,000 and more parts per trillion is being released by Tribar into our waters. So the solution to that, is to put filters, massive filters, to reduce that amount so that what's released into our waters is substantially less. However, it's still being released. So what happens at the end of the day is that we end up with these enormous filters that has concentrated PFAS in it. And now we are left with it to deal with it. They are pollutants. We have to either bury it in a landfill or we have to incinerate it. In both ways, we are releasing what's in those filters into our environment. Therefore, I am wondering, why is it that we have made no attempt to shut down Tribar? We should have shut down Gelman and held them responsible 35 years ago to protect our waters. We didn't. Simply because I feel that our lawmakers, our officials are very lenient to the rich and not that concerned about the public health. And that is very unfortunate, probably across all tiers of U.S. Political system.
Thank you.
Why aren't we suing Tribar, and why aren't we stopping its flow of PFAS into
Thank
our
you.
waters?
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Well, for almost 18 years, I've been coming here and telling you to take action against Israel, boycott, divestment, sanctions, even just a resolution urging a cutoff of military aid to Israel, even just that. And you have blocked all such resolutions to protect the Palestinian people for this June, it'll be 18 straight years in this city council. The ground is shifting underneath you and me. There are more and more people that are sympathetic to the Palestinian people. The Democratic Party's base is now more sympathetic to the Palestinian people than it is to the racist, violent state of Israel. That is what the Democratic Party base looks like now. They are more concerned with the human rights of the Palestinian people than you realize. They're more concerned with the Palestinian people than even I realize. And, you know, I look at the city council members here, most of whom have tried to just stay silent, a few of whom have spoken or written against the resolutions to defend the Palestinian people. For example, Councilmember Eaton has written, you know, that he's against any such resolution. Councilmember Lum has written that she's against any such resolution. That was a few years ago, but the ground is shifting under your feet and under mine. Councilmember Nelson has honestly said that, you know, this question doesn't really enter into her life, really. But I think that the question is entering more into everyone's life, even way out here in Ann Arbor. Bernie Sanders, a major leading presidential candidate, who's almost certainly going to be the nominee, is now out there accusing AIPAC of giving a platform to racism. And, of course, he's right. This is a change, and it's not because Bernie is a great guy. Bernie is a politician, but I think Bernie is reflecting the fact that the ground has changed underneath our feet, and the population is more concerned with the Palestinian people, and you'll be shocked to find out that you don't pay a price for supporting the Palestinian people. Actually, you're going to get credit for supporting the Palestinian people when you do. So things have changed a bit. If you don't believe me, talk with young people who are in your party, in the Democratic Party. See what they think about boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at public comment?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If you would indulge me a minute, not on public comment, but there were 2 points that I wanted to make, and I would just be doing a disservice to my office if I didn't mention at least 3 names. That is Betsy Blake in Financial Services, who Tom works with carefully, Matt Thomas, who works on litigation support, and very particularly one whole area that touches every service area, that is Margaret Radabaugh for HR, and they're without an HR director right now, but she's stepped up to do a lot of things, so I'd be remiss in not saying that to the council.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ed Vilmetti. City Attorney Postema mentioned one of the things that's often on my radar. The Freedom of Information Act saw the clerk get about 700 FOIA requests over the course of the past year. They're neatly arranged on a database on the city website so that people who are looking for information about the city and its workings can easily see what other people have asked. I was trying to figure out by looking at the open book just what this service cost the city. There's much less than one full-time person's worth of fees that have been collected, but fees only get collected if the request is sufficiently burdensome to require more than about an hour worth of time. So, you know, most requests that come in are extraordinarily ordinary. They're for things like copies of contracts, fire reports, such and the like. For the most part, this helps keep the operations of the city on a level keel. It also occasionally exposes some things that members of council might rather not see. But, you know, on the balance, I think it's part of good governance to have efficient and effective open records. So I'd like to thank the clerk's office for their effective work in doing that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. May I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Bannister. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Let's take a 5-minute break and then come on back for our
Thank you for the question.
session.